Hey out there, it's Shane Thompson from the Hockey Outsider podcast. I'm going to get up my regular waiver wire weekly players to look at. And I'll let you take a look at some of the guys I'm looking at for the next week. Now, when you're looking at the next week, I'm not going to go through how I sort out what teams I target and what I'm really looking for. But the things to really know this week is that there's a lot of teams with 4 games this week. The Ducks, Columbus, Dallas, Arizona, Florida, LA, Montreal, Winnipeg, and Vegas all have 4 games this week. But there's one team, Chicago, that has 5 games this week. So that's a good team to target if you're looking for extra points, or actually, I find it the most useful in a categories league or a bangers and mash league where you're getting hits and blocks from those players in the extra games. The teams to kind of be avoiding this week are Boston, New York Islanders, and Washington, and the Rangers. They all have 2 games this week. So, in general, a lot of their guys that if you're on the fence about whether you'd like to pick them up, or if they're on your roster and you're considering whether you cut them or not, these teams all have 2 games, so they're probably guys you want to avoid. Unless they're really guys you're scared that if you don't get them now, you won't get them in the future. Somebody else will grab them, and they're really valuable. Now, what I did was I'll go through each of my teams. My teams this year in Yahoo are pretty well set up to be good examples of a deep, very deep league, a middle tier league, and then a really shallow league. So I'm going to start with the more shallow league, so you can look at my watch list in that. Now, these guys are not going to be available in every league at all. The first on the list I wanted to look at was actually not a guy that I want to pick up off waivers, but just Erik Karlsson himself. Now, if you have Karlsson right now, you're worried, I'm sure. A lot of people are worried. He's gone pointless in about 7 games, 6 games in a row, pointless, big minus. Ottawa's been terrible since they traded Turris away, and that looks, on the whole, like it's a bad trade for Ottawa. I talked to my good buddy Mike Jensen the other day, and he mentioned that to me, that everybody talked about how Ottawa was so great in making that trade, but the lost thing in that trade was Turris being sent out, and Ottawa's been worse. Don't worry if you have Karlsson. Just like Brent Burns right now, they're good buy low targets. As you can see, if you go down before this last 6 games, he was on a big point streak of 6 games and 2 points in 3 of those games. So he's still a stud. If you could possibly get him buy low right now, go for it. I doubt anybody would give him up. Most people that have Karlsson are aware of how great he is. But just a thing to note is how bad he's been recently. I just noticed that as I was going through players this week. I've got some guys that in these more shallow leagues that I think are interesting targets. I'll start with a guy higher up in the percentage owned, Brendan Montour. Anaheim's got 4 games this week. Montour is legit. This Anaheim team just keeps pumping out good young defensemen, and he's a legit, really good defenseman. So I see him at the end of the year getting close to maybe 40 points. And solid plus player, just good all-around player, really good NHL defenseman. The other main defensemen are back in Anaheim, and he's still doing well. They've just got a really deep defensive core that helps to get these young players in and playing well right away. So Montour is a good ad, I think, season long. He's 53% owned. I think he should be more towards 70% owned. And I think he's absolutely going to keep it up all year. He's a good, solid defenseman. Another defenseman that is on a crazy hot streak is Nick Leddy. Now, if you look at his last, looks like 8 games, he's got tons of points, absolutely ripping it apart. This is what Leddy does. Leddy will go on streaks of 10 games with no points, and then when he gets hot, he goes on massive scoring binges. He right now looks like he's on pace to have his best season. And I could see that. New York Islanders are interesting this year. I kind of like them. Tavares seems to be having a really good year, and that whole team's kind of going. So they're Letty's a good ad. Now, he's not a great ad this week because they only play 2 games, but he's the kind of guy that if he happens to be available in your league, 74%, so that's only not very many leagues where he's going to be available, but take him when he's hot. So his last 2 weeks, 8 points. I mean, just take him when he's hot. If you can get him somehow, he definitely has 40-point potential, but maybe even potential to top out closer to 50 if he has keeps his streak going. Here's an interesting one, I think. Brian Little, who has been awful. Anybody who owns him this year knows he's been awful. But I have faith in him. I really love him as a hockey player. I've loved him for years and years and years. He's a hard worker. He's had a lot of rough injuries in his career. He's a little guy who goes hard. But he had 3 points the other day, and he was on a little run of 3 points in 4 games before that. And he's still on a really good scoring team in Winnipeg, who I just love that team. And they've got 4 games this week. I think he's a good ad, especially if you have face-offs as a category. He's great with face-offs. And I think he's going to turn his season around here. I believe he's closer to a 50-point player. He was on pace for much less than that before this last little spurt. So I think Brian Little's a good ad right now. You're going to get him for the good time, not for the bad time, which is great. Let's see, another guy to look at this week. I love Shea Theodore. Now, I can look at him in a deeper league as well, but I love this player, Shea Theodore. He is on a 3-game streak here since being called up again. He's got 4 points in 3 games. He's got lots of minutes, 20 minutes a game. Even got 6 blocks in a recent game, lots of shots. Vegas are still being Vegas, and they're on a 5-game win streak. So, I mean, and Vegas also have 4 games this week. I think absolutely if you're in a keeper league, you need to get him. You need him on your roster now because you never know with Theodore, with the amount of usage he's getting and the role, he could wind up being a closer to 40-point defenseman. That's not a guarantee. He's very young, but he's the kind of guy that if he gets it going, and you never know when it's going to happen, but he will be a great offensive defenseman in the future. So I would target him. A guy that I really like, and then it's very underowned, 7%, is Kevin Fiala. Now, we talked about tourists going to Nashville. Well, the direct beneficiary to that is Kevin Fiala, who right after the trade went on a nice little run of scoring some points. He's a useful player, very talented, very speedy, very skilled. He's already about to break his career point scoring, 13 points now. I really believe he's a good hockey player. He doesn't get a lot of minutes, but his minutes have gone up. He had a 19-minute game recently, which is his most of the year, I think. Then a 10-minute game, which is not great. But I think he's a very good hockey player, an underrated player. And now that he's got Turris, who's absolutely a great setup man, I like him to have good production, steady production the rest of the year. I could see him getting close to 45 points. So if you're in a league where 45 points is valuable, he doesn't do a lot of other things. He's very low in hits and blocks, and he doesn't even get a lot of shots, really. But he will get some PP time, and I think he's just going to get points. I think he's going to do well for you. Let's see, another guy here that is being added a lot is Jake DeBrusk. Now, Jake DeBrusk is on a team that only plays 2 games next week, so not super valuable. But I do still like him, and I think he's one to watch because he's a high-end talent. Boston develops players very well, and he's on a nice run of getting points here. And this might be legit. Boston really develops their young guys well and put them in the system well, and they've got guys like Bergeron on that team that just are the greatest leaders you could have. So I like DeBrusk long term. He's only 4% owned. So if you can wait this week, it would be better because you don't really want him for a 2-game week. If you're in a really deep league, this is a guy definitely you should be targeting. But even in these shallow leagues, don't underrate guys like DeBrusque. He's got 12 points now, a lot like Fiala, very similar talent. I could see DeBrusque being a 45-point guy this year, so keep an eye on him. You might want to wait till next week, though, not adding him now. Now, Schmaltz in Chicago is a guy to look at just for this week because of that 5-game week. He's getting some usage on better lines. He's not always sticking on those top 2 lines, but if he ever gets it going on one of those 2 lines, he will absolutely stick. And you can see he plays the 27th, 28th, and 30th. So he is quick right away at the beginning of the week. He's got games. So in the 5-game slate this week, he might just be worth having just for that if you can rotate him into your roster. Another guy like that, also on, I think I have, DeBrincat as well. I have him on my roster in this league. Same situation, Chicago. I like DeBrincat more overall as a player. Also doesn't do anything other than get points, though, so be aware of that. If he's in a hit or block league, you're not going to get anything else. But this week, he's a good stream in for sure. Could have a couple big games. If he just has one big game, really, you're happy to have gotten him. You can see a few more of my guys here that I've got. I'm just going to go through them without actually looking at the player profile too much. Keep an eye on David Backes. He's back soon for Boston. If you're in a hits league that values hits, he's crazy. He gets 250 a year. So if he was dropped by someone because he was hurt, just keep an eye. Another guy like that is Krejci, who's just gotten back and got a 2-point game the other day. So he's also a good hit player. He gets face-offs. He's a good all-around hockey player, really. He gets hurt all the time, but he had 54 points last year. So if you're in a league that, a guy that gets 50 points is valuable, then Krejci is one to be looking at. And clearly with a 2-point game the other day, he must be getting back to healthier. Riley Smith is another guy that people are wondering. He's 21% owned. Is he this good? Is he going to be, like right now he's got 19 points. He had only 37 all of last year. I love Riley Smith. I think last year wasn't the right team for him. I think he was in Florida. This year he's getting a lot of usage. He's getting all the power play time he could dream of. He's a super talented offensive player. Vegas are rolling, as we know, and as much as most people believe that Vegas will not keep it rolling, there's no reason not to buy in on them right now while they are rolling. If you catch them getting on a slow spurt of not scoring goals for a while, then maybe you need to worry, but don't worry right now. And a guy like Riley Smith is just enjoying life in Vegas. He's getting points, and I don't see it stopping. So if he's still available at 21% and 19 points right now, grab him. It's too late maybe in a lot of leagues, but it's not enough. His percentage of ownership should be way above 21%. On defense, this is a guy I've loved and been really watching this year and been interested if he can get it going or not, because I love Winnipeg. I've mentioned a lot that I love Winnipeg for fantasy this year. Hellebuck is a breakout goalie. A lot of their players are hitting their prime, and I think they've really got it going this year, and they're a scary team for the playoffs. I would have them in my top tier of NHL teams right now. And one of the key things seems to be that trade where they got Myers last year. They got him for very little, and he's been very good. He's been very steady at the beginning of his career in Winnipeg, more defensively, I think. But keep in mind, this guy was Rookie of the Year in the past and had, I think, almost 50 points, a 48-point season in his rookie year. And I know he went very cold after that. He's like the definition of a sophomore slump. But defensemen take time to mature. He's a big body defenseman. He's 6'7". So guys like that take a long time to develop. And he seems to me like he might have started to develop. He, in his last, let me see here. His last week, he had 4 points. Last 2 weeks, 6 points. And he's 11 on the year. So in last month, 10 points, all plus, lots of power play time. He's an absolute ad, I think. And I think you can expect 30, maybe 35, and even with the potential of him capping over 40, I think. He was had a little bit of a slow start to the year, so that might hamper him. But I would target him, and I think he stays on your roster the rest of the year. I don't think he's going to cool down. I think this is what he is. I think he's probably 35 points is my prediction, but I think he's good. I think that's about it here. The only other one, I noticed Kerfoot's being dropped by a lot of people. That's all right. I think he is droppable. But keep an eye on him. He can get hot again, and he'll be great. A lot of people are targeting Michael Camilleri because he's the new guy on McDavid line. I'm going to have to see it to believe it. Camilleri's been poor for a couple years now. So his 31 points last year, he's had good chances to be good for a couple years. He's been thrown on good lines every once in a while and doesn't seem to stick. I mean, I know the value of having somebody on McDavid's wing. Maybe you roll him out there for the 28th or the 30th and just see how he goes. But I'm not a big fan. I don't really think Camilleri is going to stick on that line. I don't know what Edmonton's going to do, to be honest, but I don't think he's the answer. Okay, I'm going to go look at my mid-tier depth league. There's just a few different names that I didn't mention in that league. There's some similar names. There's still, there you go, Tyler Myers right at the top of the list. Now, here's one I thought was really interesting, though. Brendan Perlini. He's been doing really well. 4 goals in 4 games, getting solid minutes, over about, I would say about 17 average per game, maybe a little bit more. Getting shots on goal, like solid shots on goal, which is a great sign. And he's a talented hockey player. Arizona's starting to turn it around too. They've won 4 out of the last 6. And he's a big part of the reason, it looks like. They've played him more and the team's winning. So keep an eye on Brendan Perlini. In keepers, he's definitely got value. He's a high-end talented hockey player on a good young, not a good young team, I guess, for how they're playing, but they have a lot of good young players that, if they all mature at the right time, could become a really good scoring team. Keep an eye on Perlini. I like him. Another guy, and also Perlini plays with Arizona, who have 4 games this week, so that's another reason to look at them. I got a lot of the same names here. Another one that I thought was interesting is Hanifin, who has a crazy high pedigree. He was drafted number 2 or number 3, I think, overall. He's been steady, quietly steady over the last month. Really kind of playing, and he's got 7 points in the last month. He had almost 30 points last year, but a giant minus 19. This season, he's kind of fixed up his game. They still don't play him a lot of minutes. He's still not getting quite the minutes I would like to see from a defenseman. He's only getting 15 in the last game, but it seems they've kind of figured out how to use him, and he got 2 points in that last game. So he's shooting the puck a lot more. He does get hits. He's throwing his body around a lot more, which is nice to see. He used to kind of get no periphery stats, and this year he is getting more. So that's impressive. He's definitely one to watch. If you're not going to add him this week, he might be gone, especially in a keeper, and it might be the beginning of something real good for Hanifin. He's definitely got the talent. If you're in a bangers and mash league, where when I say bangers and mash, I mean hits and blocks are counted, you definitely want to look at Alexei Emelin. He's playing solid minutes for Nashville right now, and he's a hit monster. He got 241 last year, and in the last week, he's got, just in the last week alone, he's got 13 hits. So 13 hits, 3 blocks. Not going to shoot. He's not going to get points. He's not going to do anything else. Keep in mind, I'm not suggesting this player as a point getter. So if you're in a league that you don't have blocks, you don't have hits, you don't want him. You absolutely don't want him. So he's got some value in those bangers and mash league. I think you can safely probably drop Kagula. I got value from him last week. I played him for those 4 points in 3 games. had him in my roster. Now I don't think he's good. I used him only last week because he had valuable games. He had 4 games, and they were on the right days of the week for me, and I got good value. It shows that you can get value from bad players, and I think he's a bad player, so I would drop him now. I would replace him with somebody who has more games this week or just a better overall player. I would prefer Perlini to him, actually. Okay, that's it for this league, I think. Just one guy to note, I guess. One more guy to note is Vrana. Vrana's getting it going again, and I told people don't drop him. A lot of people dropped him, especially. I'm saying this more for deep league guys. He doesn't get a lot of minutes, but he's on a team where he's going to wind up in the top 2 lines. He's going to shuffle between the top 2 lines, and they have a great top 2 lines. And Washington are scoring again, so keep an eye on Washington players in general. They only have 2 games this week. They're not a great target this week, but the week after they'll probably be a great target. Guys like Orlov are getting it going. Vrana, Backstrom will get it going. So keep an eye on Washington players. And Vrana's, you shouldn't have dropped him. I mean, if you did, you did. But if he's available, try to get him back. I would try to get him back right now. Now I'll just take a quick look at the deeper league I have. Now this deeper league is, again, you're talking pretty deep here. These are not guys that are going to be targets in a lot of leagues. Although you could have said Edler was not a target last week for a lot of leagues, and he would have been great for you in those leagues. So there are some names here. We have Chicago players again, who I'm really targeting this week if I can get them. Cody Franson, not a great hockey player, but he's in Chicago. Chicago make a lot out of a little with a lot of hockey players. He gets power play time. He gets shots when he plays, and he gets some hits, some blocks. And they're going to get 5 games this week. He had 3 points in 4 games there. You got to keep an eye on him. You never know what could happen. Like they shuffle guys in and out every once in a while, and he even gets scratched every once in a while. So you do have to watch that. But this week with 5 games, and he has 2 high value games, meaning 2 games where not a lot of teams are playing. So he absolutely will be on your roster. He'll be in your lineup. I don't mind Franson this week. See how he goes. You're probably dropping him at the end of the week, but he's got some value this specific week. Same note, Gustav Forsling in Chicago. Also only 2% owned. Not doing a lot. Like, he's not really much of a hockey player. But he gets those blocks. He gets some hits. He's shooting the puck. And he's playing solid minutes. 23 minutes, 24 minutes, 21 minutes the last 3 games. So when you got 5 games and you get 24 minutes a game, I mean, stuff has to happen. So I give him a chance this week to do a little bit. I noticed Nutivara is being added in a lot of leagues. He is a very good defenseman. Not getting a lot of minutes, kind of in the same vein as Hannafin. He's very high talent level, though. And as if you didn't know, Columbus are another team that developed defensemen very well. They had Werenski last year. And even guys like Savard and you could name Murray, all these other guys, they get value out of their draft picks that are defensemen. So keep an eye on Nutivara. They have 4 games this week, so if you are in a deep league, I would suggest adding him this week because they have the 4 games. And why not? If you don't get him now and he goes on another little point streak, he's going to be widely added because he does have a high pedigree. He's a very good hockey player in the future. I'm not guaranteeing anything this year, but you get 4 games on him in this week, and you never know. So he's a decent ad, I think. I think the final guy, ending on a kind of a boring note, but Riley Sheehan, who absolutely had done nothing for all of last year. Minus 29, disgusting stats, 13 points. Now, Sheehan was a high pedigree guy a few years ago. In 2010, he was drafted, I think, in the top 20. People thought he was going to be good. And then he really sputtered, especially last year. Now he's in Pittsburgh. He's been traded. and they seem to be using him the right way. Big surprise. Pittsburgh does something amazing with a guy who was left for dead by another team, i.e. Justin Schultz. So whenever anything like this happens in Pittsburgh, whenever you see a guy who had pedigree before, was a bust, and then gets traded to Pittsburgh and starts doing something, you gotta keep an eye on it. So he's got 5 points in 6 games. He's getting solid minutes. He gets faceoffs too if you need faceoffs in your league. And I know it's an underrated stat in fantasy. He gets a lot of faceoffs actually. Look at that. He's 12, 13, 10, 10, 9, 9. Good. That's good faceoff totals. That's like up there with the league leaders if he keeps that up. So they're using him as a faceoff expert is what it looks like. He's shooting the puck a fair bit. He even gets some blocks. Like that's rare for forwards. That shows he's playing hard defensively. So I kind of like Sheehan. I like him as he's only playing 3 games this week, so he's not that valuable this week. But you never know with Pittsburgh guys. They really can pull something out of nothing. So keep an eye on him for sure. Put him on your watch list. See how he does this week. You see he plays on the 27th and then not until the 1st and then not 1st and 2nd. So maybe you just wait until later in the week. You let him play on the 27th, see how he does. And then for that December 1st and 2nd matchup, you throw him in your lineup for those last 2 games, especially if you're trying to catch up to someone at the very end. I think he's a reasonable target, and don't discount him because he actually did have high pedigree in his past. I think that's it. So this week, if I were you, if any advice I would give, it would be to target Chicago players, especially if you're counting deep stats. Even a guy like Richard Panik has some value. But those are the main targets. Another name I'll mention is Grabner in New York Rangers. He's been cold, but they play 4 games this week against some poor defensive teams. So he could get you some points, and definitely if you're in a goals league, he could have some value. And the final name I'll say is Thomas Hertl. Hertl, people are asking if he's legit, if he's going to be as good as he's kind of shown this year. He's 14 points right now. I think he is. I think he's going to be good this year. I think he's one of their new young guys that's going to come in there and they're going to use him as a scorer. And I don't see why he couldn't be a really good player this year. He's also 21% owned. He gets face-offs. Look at those shots on goal. That's what I like to see. 3, 3, 3, 4, 5. So he's putting the puck on the net all the time. And guys like that are going to get goals. They're going to get points. They're going to get played by their team more because that's what coaches want to see. So he's absolutely, if he's somehow available, he's 21% owned. I can't believe that. 21% owned guy with 14 points and just positive stats everywhere. I think he's absolutely a buy-in. Get him on your team and enjoy the rest of the year with him. I think he could get 45 points as well. Another guy right in that 45 to 50 point potential. I think he's got a bit of injury history, so keep an eye on that. He does hit a lot, so he throws his body around, and a lot of the time those guys are risky for injuries. But I think he's worth adding. So that's it. A little bit longer this time. Wanted to get more into more players that I think are interesting this week. If there's any other guys I think of, I'll throw it into the comments below. And I hope this helps a few people out there. I know some of my buddies from back home will probably make fun of my picks, but I was pretty right last week. So let's keep it rolling. Let's see if we get lucky 2 weeks in a row. All right, peace out.